Hello everyone. I just couldn't resist to show you the Azure Copilot which I have got access to, and right now it is in a preview mode with a limited capacity, which means that even if you get an access you can do only certain amount of things just to throttle the amount of access we reach out to the large language model behind the scene, which is kind of consuming a lot of memory and compute power. But let me show you a couple of very interesting things. So when you get the Copilot, it comes on top of your Azure portal, and then you hit that, this window comes up, right? Which basically opens right on your Azure thing. So you can give the feedback saying the and then if you don't like, you provide the feedback. So it's basically to improve if you don't like some of the outputs. For example, let me see that if I can figure out how many resources I have got in my Azure subscription. So do I have in my Azure subscription? Now this is contextual, which means that whichever subscription you are right now logged into, you will basically be able to get the information provided you can actually get that information from that subscription. So it applies all the RBAC. It is in this context because it runs against your login. So it basically runs a resource graph query. If you do not have proper authorization to run the resource graph query, you cannot get that information. So now it is actually finding out the resource graph query to summarize with a count. That means total number of resources, and because I have got the authorization, it can fetch the number for me. And you can also click on run here, and it opens the resource graph query explorer right in this Azure portal, where you can also run the query and get the result as 204. This is the same thing. So it does quite a bit of back and forth when it tries to figure out things. Not only that, you can see that it gives me a number like 1 of 10 requests, which means that I can only do 10 things right at this point in time. But it also say that what type of resources do I have in my Azure subscription. This is a kind of follow-up question I'm going to ask, which eventually will create another resource graph query, grouping those kind of similar resources together and summarizing with a count for each of these things. You can see that you can see the summarize by type, and this is the query which you can also click here as run, and it will show me the number here, right? You can see that it shows various different resources. I keep on creating here, and it gives me around 46 of them, right? So you can see this also gives me, so now it shows number 2, right? So I like this output. You keep giving the feedback. Now if I say that I want to create 10 virtual machines using Azure CLI. Let's see what it gives. So basically I want to create 10 virtual machine using Azure CLI. It should provide me a script which ideally I can run against my Cloud Shell. So it also will give me an ability to run it against the Cloud Shell. And you can ask any question. So typically, if you follow along the documentation which provides all the capabilities right now we have got here, right, you can perform some tasks, get the information, navigate. So you can see that it is now giving me query which basically creates a virtual machine name with the size and all these things, and you can repeat this command 10 times, each time a unique name for the virtual machine. So it also gives me kind of like a little bit of information around like how can I modify this. It's a quite helpful one. If we click on run, right, it goes ahead, opens the Cloud Shell, you can see right here, and pastes the query, the script, and then it will run just like the resource graph query, right? So it's basically very, very convenient. Now, if I say that I want to know if any virtual machine in my subscription, you don't need to say, but it's good, like we ask the right question, is running. If so, please stop deallocate them, right? So let me just put two actions into one single prompt. And you see that I don't need to know a lot of technicalities of it. I can just start fetching, and it also gives me information from the documentation if it needs to provide me additional information and do things like that. So if you see that, I'm sorry, I'm unable to retrieve the information about running virtual machine in your Azure subscription at this moment, so I didn't really like it. So it should give me. So you can say that inaccurate and share it and you give this up feedback. So it's the feedback is important because it is right now in preview. It needs to collect a lot of feedback information. So let's try some of the things which it claims that claims to do that, right? So for example, if I think about like cost related information, where we typically ask like, can you tell me the last 6 months cost? So if I say that, please, no, you don't need to say, please summarize my last 6 months cost. If I run that, you can see that it is going to try something, right? As I said, like it might not. You can see that it didn't provide me the CLI, though it claimed. So I can make it simple. I can try again with the same prompt, and it should give me a CLI. But you can see that it is going to give me that thing. So it is very convenient, right? I can now take a screenshot and then start working on it, right? I can copy the whole content and give that. So um, uh, let me know the top 5 costly resources. Okay, so this is kind of like a question I want to ask, right? So basically I want to check like what are the kind of resources I am running, like if there is any, let's say, costly kind of resources which is kind of running today. And you can see that it's kind of saying that top 5 uh, order by cost, top 5. So let me wait for the result to come, but otherwise if you wish to do that, you can always run it in your thing, and you can see that activity log alerts, Ubuntu dev, security failed. See, these are the names, right? It's much more, let's say, formatted output which you get over here, right? You can even go ahead and say that get me an YAML file for something you are interested, right? So for example, if you are building some sort of like front-end service using port 8080, what documentation suggests, you can see that generate YAML file for a pod using Nginx image. Let's go at the simple thing, which basically needs kubectl run command, but I'm just going to use the YAML version of it. So let's see if it can populate any YAML for me, which basically should use the Nginx as the base image, create a pod, and there should be an YAML ready for me. Sorry, it is not able to do that. So it is also failing at this point in time. But if you, let's say, use the one which documentation suggests, right? Help me generate an YAML file for front. So let me just get it here. So if you say that help me generate an YAML file with the, you have to be very specific. Kubernetes YAML file, I didn't mention that, so probably that failed there. So if you say that it's the Kubernetes, then it can narrow it down. Otherwise, what is that YAML really means, right? Is it something else? Is it a DevOps YAML? It's also not able to find, right? So you can see that sometime it fails. Let me check that. Um, change the theme to dark. Change to change to the dark theme. Right now it is light. And then you can see that it is going to change the theme of my portal to dark. Pretty cool, huh? And then if I say that I please change the theme back to previous. Let's see if it can return back to the old state. Yeah, it is back to the blue theme, which I use often. So you can see that it's kind of like very convenient for me. I don't need to remember where to go and do all those stuff, right? But it is able to get me all the things, right? Behind the scene, it uses the Azure OpenAI, right? Which gets deployed to one of the Azure subscription, and it's a read-only copy of the large language model, which means that whatever you do, your data does not get trained in for those models. So you just basically use the data, contextual data, to ground your model. We call it sometime retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. Using various different vector databases, you can embed them and then produce a prompt which is much relevant to your data, rather than retraining the whole model, which takes days and months to do so, right? So that's kind of happening behind the scene. It is also secure because I can do things at Portal, the same thing I can do using this Copilot, so I don't need let you to worry about like doing something else for somebody else. If I am the read-only user, I can only read things. I will not be able to make any changes, just like normal RBAC thing, because you see that that action is not happening in the Copilot. It is basically guiding me and happening in the actual ARM. So all the ARM things are all in place. So it is just the beginning, right? So, but I am very, very excited personally, because I spend a lot of time in Azure Portal on my day-to-day basis. So when I need something, I don't need to come out of the Azure Portal, search something else somewhere, come back. I can do that. I can even look out for the documentation, so you can see that I'm kind of done with it, right? Um, so this is all. I hope that once you get a chance, you will start exploring it. This is one of the favorite co-pilots just after the GitHub one. So this is my second favorite co-pilot till now. It might become first one depending on the usability, but I'm liking it since I'm using it. So thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.